The colony's ship Whisper of Dawn had been dying for 3 weeks now, and Captain Thelvar could do nothing but watch as his people perished one by one in the cold embrace of the void. The ship's corridors, once filled with the gentle songs of his species, now echoed only with the labored breathing of the sick and the quiet sobbing of children who understood, in that terrible way children do, that something was very wrong. Thelvar stood on the bridge, his legs trembling with exhaustion, his feathered body slumped against the navigation console. The soft blue plumage that marked him as a scholar of the highest order had dulled to gray, matted with sweat and grime. His large eyes, evolved to see in the gentle twilight of his homeworld, stared at the viewscreen where a yellow star burned in the distance. It was their last hope, and even that hope was thin as paper. 3 weeks ago, Thelvar had watched his world die. The Kresh Empire had come without warning, their war fleet blotting out the sun as it descended on the planet Vakros. The Vakran had been a peaceful species for 4,000 years, their society built on art, philosophy, and the pursuit of knowledge. They had no weapons that could stand against the Kresh armada, no warriors trained for such brutality. Within 6 hours, the bombardment had begun. Within 3 days, 4 billion Vakran were dead, their cities turned to glass, their libraries burned, their children scattered like ash on the wind. Only the Whisper of Dawn had escaped, a colony ship that had been in orbit during the attack. Thelvar, who had been preparing for a peaceful mission to establish a research outpost on Vakros's third moon, found himself instead loading every survivor he could find into the cargo holds. 127 souls, all that remained of a civilization that had stood for millennia. He had jumped blind into the black, choosing a random vector away from the Kresh fleet, and by pure chance had found himself heading toward the region of space that every galactic chart marked in crimson, the Forbidden Zone. For 3 generations, the galaxy had avoided this sector. 60 years ago, the Galactic Council had sent probe ships to explore what appeared to be a promising yellow star system. The probes had vanished. Survey vessels were dispatched. They too disappeared without a trace, their transmissions simply ceasing as if swallowed by darkness itself. The Council had declared the region forbidden and moved on. There were millions of stars in the galaxy. One haunted sector was easily avoided, but for the Vakran there was nowhere else to go. Behind them, the Kresh hunter-killer ships prowled the trade lanes, searching for survivors. To either side lay Council space, where the governments had already made it clear they would not risk war with the Kresh Empire over a functionally extinct species. The Forbidden Zone was their only option, and even that was less a choice than a final desperate roll of cosmic dice. Now, as the Whisper of Dawn limped toward that yellow star, her engines stuttering and misfiring, her life support systems failing one by one, Thelvar wondered if perhaps the probes had been right to fear this place. Perhaps they would simply vanish as those others had, winking out of existence as if they had never been at all. It would almost be a mercy. At least the children would stop suffering. The ship shuddered, and alarms blared across the bridge. The primary power coupling had finally given up, and they were running on emergency batteries now. They had perhaps 6 hours of life support remaining. The yellow star loomed larger on the viewscreen, and Thelvar could see planets now, small dots orbiting the distant sun. One of them, the third from the star, shone blue and green, swirled with white clouds. A living world. "We die running or we die trying," Thelvar whispered to himself, his voice hoarse. Perhaps there is mercy in the unknown. He did not know that at that very moment on the far side of the solar system, humanity was watching. The Terran Deep Space Station Sentinel-7 hung in the black beyond Neptune's orbit, a silent watchman at the edge of the abyss. For 60 years, stations like this one had maintained humanity's great secret, the elaborate deception that had hidden Earth from the galaxy's eyes. The sensor network was sophisticated, powerful, and until today, had worked flawlessly. Every probe that entered the system was redirected by false readings. Every scan from distant civilizations returned null results, showing Sol as nothing more than a lifeless yellow dwarf with barren rocks in orbit. Commander Jack Reeves had been stationed on Sentinel-7 for 3 years, and in that time, he had never seen a genuine contact. The 52-year-old veteran had gray in his beard and scars from the incident that had sent humanity into hiding, and he preferred the quiet tedium of deep space watch to the alternative. He sat in the command chair nursing his fourth coffee of the shift when the alarms began to scream. Contact! Ensign Patel shouted from the sensor station, her voice cracking with surprise. Unknown vessel bearing 273 Mark IV, distance 800 million kilometers and closing. Reeves was out of his chair before she finished speaking, his coffee forgot. How the hell did something get through the grid? I don't know, sir. It just appeared on our screens. It's inside the network perimeter. Reeves leaned over her shoulder, studying the readings. The contact was small, perhaps 200 meters long, and it was moving erratically. Its energy signature was all wrong, fluctuating wildly. As he watched, the ship's trajectory wobbled, correcting itself clumsily. "That ship is dying," Reeves said quietly. "Pull up a tactical analysis." The computer rendered its verdict in seconds. Radiation leaking from damaged engines, life support operating at minimal capacity, structural integrity compromised in at least 7 locations. The vessel was heading toward Mars on what appeared to be a desperation course, probably hoping to find something, anything that might save whoever was aboard. "Get me Luna Command," Reeves ordered. "Priority 1, and bring the station to high alert. I want every system online and every crew member at their post 5 minutes ago." As his crew scrambled to comply, Reeves stared at the dying ship on his screen and felt the weight of 60 years of secrecy pressing down on him. The standing orders were clear. No unknown contact enters the inner system. The isolation protocol was absolute, but those orders had been written with the assumption that any contact would be hostile or at least intentional. This ship wasn't invading. It was begging. At Luna Command, deep beneath the gray dust of Earth's moon, Admiral Marcus Webb was in a meeting when the alert came through. The 67-year-old admiral had been in charge of Terran defense for a decade, and in that time he had prepared for every contingency he could imagine. Invasion, first contact, diplomatic overtures, even the return of the Galactic Council with apologies and offers of friendship. He had not prepared for refugees. Webb dismissed his staff with curt efficiency and pulled up the data from Sentinel-7 on his private screen. He studied the readings for a full minute, his weathered face impassive, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. Then he opened a channel to Commander Reeves. "Commander, this is Webb. What's your tactical assessment?" Reeves's voice came through crisp and professional. "Sir, that ship isn't a threat. It's barely holding together. Best guess, they jumped blind into the system running from something and don't even know we're here. And if they do know we're here, then they're the worst invasion force in the history of warfare, sir." Webb allowed himself a thin smile. "Fair point. Hold your position, Commander. I'm convening an emergency council. Whatever we decide, I want you ready to move in 30 minutes. "Understood, sir. Sentinel-7 standing by." Webb closed the channel and sat back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his face. For 60 years, humanity had lived by one rule: stay hidden. After first contact with the Galactic Council had ended in violence, after the Council's peacekeepers had fired on Earth's diplomatic vessel and killed everyone aboard in what they called a regrettable misunderstanding, humanity had made a choice. They could fight a galaxy that feared them, or they could disappear. They had chosen disappearance, building a sensor network that made Sol invisible, scrubbing their presence from galactic records, becoming nothing more than a ghost story whispered in the dark corners of space stations. Now something was dying on their doorstep, and Webb faced the question he had hoped never to answer. What price secrecy? He opened a channel to Earth, to the Terran Council that governed humanity's unified government. Within 15 minutes, holographic projections of the 7 council members materialized around his conference table. Webb wasted no time with pleasantries. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation." He brought up the sensor data, letting them see what he saw. "An unknown vessel, badly damaged, is entering our inner system. It will reach Mars orbit in approximately 6 hours. If we do nothing, everyone aboard will be dead in 7. Councillor Zhang, the representative from East Asia, leaned forward. "Do we know who they are?" No identification yet. The ship's transmitters are damaged, but whoever they are, they're not military. The vessel is a colony-class transport, unarmed and falling apart. This could be a trap, Counselor Osa from the African Union said, her voice cautious. The Council tried to eliminate us once. This could be a probe to see if we still exist. Possible, Webb acknowledged. But if it's a trap, it's an elaborate one. The damage readings are consistent across all our sensors. Either that ship is genuinely dying or someone went to extraordinary lengths to make it look that way. Counselor Petrov from the Russian Federation grunted. And if we help them, the galaxy learns we're here. Everything we've built, the safety we've bought with 60 years of silence, gone. Perhaps, Webb said quietly. Or perhaps the galaxy learned something else. That we're not what they thought we were. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Counselor Martinez from South America spoke, her voice soft but firm. We didn't hide for 60 years to become what they feared. If there are people dying up there and we do nothing, then what are we? What have we become? Webb looked around the table, seeing the struggle on each face. They were afraid, and they had every right to be. The galaxy had tried to destroy them once. But he saw something else too, something that made him believe in humanity's future. I'm not ordering a rescue, Webb said. I'm asking for authorization to offer help. If they refuse, if it's some kind of trick, we'll deal with it. But I won't let people die in our space without at least trying to save them. That's not who we are. One by one, the counselors nodded. The vote was unanimous. 32 minutes after Reeves's initial report, the TDSS Mercy broke orbit from Luna and burned hard toward Mars, her engines flaring bright in the darkness. The Mercy was a fast response vessel, built for exactly this kind of situation, though her designers had imagined rescuing human colonists, not unknown aliens. Commander Reeves had transferred his flag to the Mercy, leaving Sentinel-7 under his executive officer's command. If this was going to be humanity's return to the galactic stage, Reeves wanted to be there to see it. The Mercy caught up with the Whisper of Dawn 3 hours later, matching velocity with the tumbling colony ship as it drifted past the orbit of Mars. Up close, the alien vessel was even worse than the sensors had suggested. Scorch marks covered the hull, evidence of weapons fire. Entire sections were vented to space, their bulkheads blown out. Ship was a miracle of desperation, held together by failing force fields and prayers. Life signs, Reeves asked his sensor officer. Confirmed, sir. 123. No, wait, 127. The readings are faint, but they're there. And, sir, they're not human. Well, we knew that much. Reeves opened a channel on all frequencies, cycling through every standard first contact protocol humanity had developed. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Jack Reeves of the Terran defense ship Mercy. We have detected your distress. We are here to help. Please respond. Silence answered him, broken only by static. Reeves tried again, running through 6 different languages and modulation patterns. Nothing. Their communications are probably dead, Lieutenant Vasily said from the tactical station. I'm reading multiple system failures across their entire ship. Reeves made his decision. Prep boarding teams. Full environmental suits, medical kits, and translation software. We're going in. 20 minutes later, Reeves led a team of 6 through the airlock they had burned into the Whisper of Dawn's hull. What they found inside would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Bodies lay in the corridors, covered with thin blankets, arranged with obvious care by people who had no more strength to move them. The aliens were unlike anything in humanity's admittedly limited database of galactic species. They were quadrupedal, covered in soft feathers that reminded Reeves of birds, with large eyes set in delicate faces. They looked fragile, beautiful, and utterly exhausted. The living ones barely reacted to the humans' arrival. They simply stared with those enormous eyes, too weak to flee, too traumatized to care. A child, no more than a meter tall, watched from a doorway as Reeves passed. The universal translator on his suit picked up a whisper. Are they the ones who killed us? Reeves stopped, his heart breaking. He knelt slowly, making himself small and non-threatening, and the child didn't run. Through his translator, he said carefully, No, little one, we're here to help. Can you take me to whoever's in charge? The child stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked deeper into the ship. Reeves followed, his team spreading out to begin emergency medical triage. They found Captain Thelvar on the bridge, slumped over a console, his breathing shallow. When Reeves touched his shoulder, the alien captain jerked awake, his eyes wide with terror. "Please," Thelvar whispered, the translator rendering his words in broken English. "Please, we mean no harm. We are refugees. We have nothing. Just let us die in peace. Don't make it hurt." Reeves felt something crack inside his chest. This being thought they were here to finish what someone else had started. He removed his helmet, showing his face, letting the alien see his expression. "I'm Commander Jack Reeves. Nobody's dying today. We're getting you to safety." Thelvar stared at him, and Reeves watched comprehension slowly dawn in those alien eyes. Not comprehension of the words, but of something deeper. Recognition that perhaps, impossibly, someone had come to help. You don't want to kill us." "No," Reeves said firmly. "We want to save you, all of you, but we need to move fast. Can you help me get your people to our ship?" What happened next would become legend in both human and Vakran history. Despite their injuries, despite their exhaustion, despite having every reason to distrust the universe, the Vakran let themselves be carried to safety by these strange bipedal creatures who had appeared from nowhere. Reeves's medical team worked miracles in the Mercy's sickbay, stabilizing the worst cases, treating radiation sickness and malnutrition and injuries that no being should have survived. And through it all, the Vakran kept asking the same question. Why? The Mercy burned hard for Earth, running at maximum acceleration with Admiral Webb's authorization to break every protocol in the book. 16 hours after the initial rescue, the ship entered Earth's atmosphere and descended toward Ascension Island, a remote facility that had been prepared for exactly this scenario, though no one had truly believed they would ever use it. As the Mercy's landing gear touched down on the tarmac, Captain Thelvar pressed his face against a viewport and saw a world he had only dreamed of. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across a sky so bright it hurt to look at, and everywhere the evidence of a thriving civilization that had somehow remained hidden from the galaxy. "What is this place?" he whispered. Dr. James Kowalski, the chief medical officer who had been treating him during the flight, smiled. "Welcome to Earth, Captain. You're safe now." The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of medical treatment and careful diplomacy. The Vakran were brought to the facility's medical center, where human doctors worked around the clock to stabilize them. Dr. Kowalski, a 54-year-old physician who specialized in xenobiology, found himself inventing new treatments on the fly. The Vakran physiology was similar enough to Earth species that basic medicine worked, but they were severely malnourished, their bodies depleted from weeks of starvation and stress. The children responded fastest. Within 2 days, the young Vakran who had first led Reeves to the bridge was running through the facility's gardens, laughing as human children showed her how to play catch. She had given her name as Vestrin, and she had adopted Dr. Kowalski as a surrogate parent, following him everywhere with wide-eyed curiosity. The adults recovered more slowly, and not just physically. Thelvar spent hours being debriefed by Admiral Webb and a team of xenoanthropologists, historians, and military intelligence officers. Through translators that improved by the hour as the AI learned Vakran language patterns, he told Earth the story of what had happened to his people. The Kresh Empire, Thelvar explained, had been expanding for 2 centuries. They were a reptilian species, aggressive and militaristic, bred for conquest on a high-gravity world that made them incredibly strong. Where most species negotiated and traded, the Kresh simply took what they wanted. They had conquered 47 worlds in the past 100 years, enslaving some populations, exterminating others, always expanding their territory. The Vakran had been targeted because their worlds were rich in rare minerals. They had tried to negotiate, offering to share their resources peacefully. The Kresh had responded with orbital bombardment, 4 billion dead in less than a week. The genocide had been methodical, efficient, and brutally complete. And the Galactic Council, Admiral Webb asked quietly. They did nothing. Thelvar's feathers rippled with what the translators identified as deep sadness. The Council issued a statement of concern. They held emergency sessions. They debated sanctions, But the Kresh are powerful and the Vakrin were weak. We had no strategic value, no military alliances. In the end, the galaxy decided we were not worth a war. Webb sat back in his chair, his expression dark. Around the conference table, the human officers were silent, processing this information. The galaxy they had left behind 60 years ago had apparently grown more callous, more willing to overlook atrocity in the name of stability. "Tell me about the Forbidden Zone," Webb said. "How did you end up here?" "Desperation," Thelvar said simply. "The Kresh hunter-killer ships were pursuing us. Council space would not harbor us. The only direction left was into the sector you call the Forbidden Zone. We expected to die. Instead, we found you." He paused, his large eyes studying Webb intently. "But you are not on any galactic charts. There is no record of your species, no mention of this world. How is that possible?" Webb exchanged glances with his officers. They had known this question would come. "That's a long story, Captain, and if we're going to tell it, I think your people deserve to hear it too. Would you gather them? We have much to discuss." That evening, in the facility's main hall, Admiral Webb stood before 127 Vakrin refugees and told them about humanity. He explained first contact, how Earth's diplomatic vessel had approached the Galactic Council with open hands and peaceful intentions. He described how the Council's peacekeepers, startled by humanity's appearance and frightened by Earth's high gravity and the strength it gave its people, had fired first and justified it later. 43 humans had died in that attack, vaporized in an instant by weapons meant to defend, not murder. The galaxy had apologized, called it a tragic mistake, offered reparations, but Earth had seen the fear in the Council's eyes, had read between the lines of their diplomatic messages. The galaxy saw humans as dangerous, as deathworlders who were too strong, too aggressive, too unpredictable to integrate peacefully. So humanity had made a choice. "We disappeared," Webb said, his voice carrying in the quiet hall. "We built a sensor network that made our system invisible. We erased ourselves from galactic records. We've been watching the galaxy for 60 years, but we've never reached out. We decided that if the galaxy couldn't accept us, we would rather be alone." Elder Mernset, the oldest Vakrin and their chief historian, spoke up from the front row. "But you revealed yourselves for us. Why, we are nothing. We have nothing to offer you." Webb looked at the old Vakrin for a long moment. "Because the strong are supposed to protect the weak. Because it was right. Because no one else would." He paused. "Didn't hide for 60 years to become what the galaxy feared. If we let people die when we could save them, what would that make us?" The Vakrin were silent, absorbing this. Then Vestrin, the child who had first led Reeves to the bridge, spoke up in her high, clear voice. "Does this mean we can stay?" Webb smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, some of the tension left his shoulders. "Yes, little one, you can stay as long as you need to. Earth is your home now if you want it to be." The Vakrin began to weep, and the sound of their crying filled the hall. These were not tears of sorrow, but of relief so profound it bordered on physical pain. They had expected death, or at best, cold tolerance from a galaxy that had abandoned them. They had not expected kindness from strangers who owed them nothing. But humanity's generosity would be tested sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after the Vakrin's arrival on Earth, long-range sensors detected new contacts entering the outer solar system. Commander Patricia Hernandez, Reeves's replacement on Sentinel-7, watched the readings with growing alarm. 3 ships, military-grade, moving in a standard hunter-killer formation. Their energy signatures matched nothing in Earth's database, but their trajectory was unmistakable. They were following the Whisper of Dawn's warp trail, tracking the refugees who had dared to escape. "Get me Luna Command," Hernandez ordered, her voice tight. "And someone wake up Admiral Webb. We have company." The Kresh warships entered the inner system 12 hours later, their sensors sweeping across Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt with obvious confusion. Commander Torgash of the lead vessel, the Endless Hunger, stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. The planet before him should not exist. His charts showed this system as empty, a lifeless yellow dwarf with nothing of value. Yet here was a world teeming with technology, with power readings that suggested a significant civilization. And somewhere on that world were the Vakrin survivors who had dared to flee the Empire's justice. Torgash was a career officer, bred for war on a world where the gravity crushed weaklings, and only the strong survived to adulthood. He had commanded hunter-killer squadrons for 20 years, and he had never failed to complete a mission. The fact that one small colony ship had eluded him for 3 weeks was an embarrassment he intended to rectify. He opened a broad-spectrum channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Inhabitants of this world, this is Commander Torgash of the Kresh Imperial Navy. You are harboring fugitives from Kresh justice. Surrender the Vakran refugees immediately, or you will be considered hostile to the Empire. This is your only warning. At Luna Command, Admiral Webb listened to the broadcast with cold fury. Around him, his senior staff stood at their stations, waiting for orders. On the main view screen, the 3 Kresh warships hung in space like sharks circling prey. Analysis, Webb asked quietly. Captain Diana Frost, his tactical officer, pulled up the data. Each ship is approximately 800 meters long, heavily armed. We're reading plasma cannons, missile batteries, and what appears to be a magnetic acceleration weapon. Shields are active and robust, sir. These are frontline warships. They're designed to take on capital ships and win. And our chances, Frost hesitated. Unknown, sir. We've never fought the Kresh. Our simulations suggest we could take one of them, maybe 2 if we get lucky. 3 is problematic. Problematic, Webb repeated, tasting the word. That's one way to put it. He looked around the command center, seeing the faces of men and women who had trained for this moment but never believed it would come. Options. We could surrender the Vakran, someone suggested quietly. It would maintain our secrecy and avoid a conflict we might not win. Webb turned to face the officer who had spoken, a young lieutenant whose name badge read Thompson. Lieutenant, if we surrendered refugees who came to us for protection, what would that make us? Thompson had the grace to look ashamed. I understand, sir. I withdraw the suggestion. Anyone else have thoughts? Commander Reeves, who had been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward. Sir, we have another option. We could reveal ourselves fully, deploy the fleet, and tell them exactly what will happen if they don't leave. We've been building ships for 60 years with no one to test them against. Maybe it's time the galaxy remembered why they marked this sector as forbidden. Webb considered this. Earth's fleet consisted of 15 capital ships, built in secret in the shipyards of Luna and Mars, designed with 60 years of technological advancement that the galaxy hadn't shared. Humanity had taken the weapons technology they understood from their brief contact with the Council and pushed it forward, innovating in isolation. They had railguns that could punch through any known shielding, directed energy weapons powered by fusion reactors, fighter craft that could pull maneuvers no other species could survive, but they had never tested any of it in real combat. Get me Captain Thelvar, Webb ordered. He deserves to know what's happening. 5 minutes later, Thelvar entered the command center, accompanied by Elder Mernset. The Vakran captain had recovered significantly in the past few days, his feathers regaining some of their luster, but he still looked fragile compared to the humans around him. When he saw the Kresh warships on the view screen, his legs nearly buckled. No, he whispered. No, they found us. Yes, Webb said gently. They followed your warp trail. They're demanding we surrender you. Thelvar turned to face the Admiral, his eyes wide with desperation. Then you must, please, Admiral. You've already done more for us than we had any right to ask. Don't fight them. Don't die for us. The Kresh are brutal, but they might leave you alone if you give them what they want. Elder Mernset placed a comforting hand on Thelvar's shoulder. The captain is right, Admiral Webb. We are grateful beyond measure for your kindness, but we will not allow you to sacrifice yourselves for a people you barely know. Webb looked at both Vakran for a long moment, then shook his head. I'm afraid I can't do that. You're under Earth's protection now. That means something to us. But why? Thelvar asked, his voice breaking. We have nothing. We are nothing. 4 billion of us died and the galaxy did not care. Why should you? Because it's the right thing to do, Webb said simply. And because if we let bullies like the Kresh dictate terms to us, we might as well have stayed hidden forever. He turned to his tactical officer. Captain Frost, deploy the fleet. All ships, battle stations. It's time the Kresh learned about humanity. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The Terran Defense Fleet, hidden in the shadows of Luna and Mars, powered up their engines and moved into formation. 15 capital ships, led by the flagships TDSS Defiant, Indomitable and Relentless, emerged into open space with their weapons armed and their shields at maximum. On the bridge of the Endless Hunger, Commander Torgash watched in disbelief as the human fleet materialized on his sensors. What is this? Those ships weren't there a moment ago. His sensor officer, a young Kresh named Veltash, worked frantically at his console. Sir, I don't understand. Our long-range scans showed this system as empty. There should be nothing here but primitive rock formations. Obviously, there's more here than our scans showed, Torgash snarled. Identify those vessels. What species are we facing? A moment later, a channel opened, and Admiral Webb's face appeared on the Endless Hunger's main view screen. Torgash had seen many species in his career, but the being before him was unfamiliar. Bipedal, Predator's eyes set forward for depth perception, strong jaw suggesting an omnivorous diet, and in those eyes something that made even Torgash pause, absolute determination. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force, the human said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. You've entered human space without authorization. The beings you seek are under our protection. You have one opportunity to leave peacefully. I suggest you take it. Torgash laughed, the sound harsh and grating. Humans, you're the species that ran away 60 years ago. Your kind surrendered to the galaxy, hid like cowards in the dark. And now you dare threaten the Kresh Empire. He leaned forward, his reptilian features twisting into a sneer. Your ships are impressive for primitives, but you are vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Give us the Vakran and we might let you live. Webb's expression didn't change. We didn't surrender, Commander. We chose isolation. There's a difference. As for being outgunned, he smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I guess we're about to find out. The channel closed. Torgash stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his weapons officer. Target their flagship. Let's teach these Deathworlders what happens when they interfere with the Kresh Empire. The Endless Hunger opened fire first, plasma cannons launching bolts of superheated matter across the void at near-light speed. The human fleet scattered, their ships moving with surprising agility for vessels of their size. The Defiant took a glancing hit on its forward shields, the energy washing across the barrier in a cascade of light, but the shields held. Then humanity answered. The railgun batteries mounted on Luna's surface opened fire, launching projectiles at 3% of light speed. The Endless Hunger's shields flared as the first round struck, absorbing the impact. The second round punched through, tearing a gash in the warship's hull. The third round missed entirely, but the fourth and fifth struck home, and suddenly the Kresh flagship was venting atmosphere and debris. Evasive action, Torgash screamed, his confidence evaporating. All ships, return fire, target those orbital weapons. The battle dissolved into chaos. The Kresh warships were powerful, their weapons deadly, designed to destroy civilizations. But they had never fought humans before, and they quickly discovered that humanity's 60 years of isolation had not been wasted. The Terran ships moved like nothing the Kresh had ever encountered, pulling high-G turns that would have liquefied most organic species. Human pilots pushed their vessels to the limits of structural integrity and beyond, using every advantage their high-gravity evolution had given them. Commander Reeves led Red Squadron, a formation of 20 fighter craft, in a daring attack run on the Endless Hunger. The fighters were small, fast, and piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for combat they never expected to see. They swarmed the Kresh flagship like angry hornets, their directed energy weapons slicing through damaged sections of hull, targeting engines and weapon batteries. "This is Red Leader," Reeves called over the squadron channel. "Focus fire on the portside engine cluster. Let's cripple this thing." The fighters coordinated their attack with the precision of a surgical strike, and within minutes, the Endless Hunger's port engine exploded in a brilliant flash. The warship began to list, its trajectory degrading as it lost maneuvering capability, but the Kresh were not defeated yet. The second warship, the Crimson Fang, managed to get a firing solution on the TDSS Indomitable. Plasma cannons and magnetic accelerators fired in concert, overwhelming the human ship's shields. The Indomitable's hull breached in 3 places and the ship began to tumble. Captain Rodriguez, commanding the Indomitable, made a decision that would become legendary. With his ship dying and his crew evacuating to life pods, he locked onto the Crimson Fang and engaged his engines at full power. "This is Rodriguez," he broadcast on all channels, his voice calm despite the alarms screaming around him. "Indomitable is lost. I'm taking one of them with me, for Earth, for everyone who couldn't fight back." The Indomitable, all 700,000 tons of her, slammed into the Crimson Fang at a relative velocity of 300 kilometers per second. The impact was visible from Earth, a brief sun that flared and died in the space of heartbeats. When the light faded, both ships were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The third Kresh warship, the Shadow of Conquest, tried to disengage, its commander realizing too late that this was not the easy hunt he had expected. But the human ships pursued relentlessly, their weapons tearing into the Kresh vessel from multiple angles. Railguns, lasers, missiles, and even kinetic impactors launched from the asteroid belt converged on the fleeing ship. Admiral Webb watched from Luna Command, his heart heavy as casualty reports came in. 47 dead, including Captain Rodriguez and his volunteer skeleton crew, 3 ships heavily damaged, but the Kresh were broken. The Endless Hunger drifted near Jupiter, crippled and leaking. The Shadow of Conquest was surrounded, its engines dead, its weapons disabled. Webb opened a channel to the surviving Kresh ships. "This is Admiral Webb. Power down your weapons and surrender. You will be treated as prisoners of war according to the rules of civilized warfare. You have 30 seconds to comply." On the bridge of the Endless Hunger, Commander Torgash stared at the human fleet surrounding his dying ship. Half his crew was dead. His engines were destroyed. 2 of his 3 vessels were gone, one obliterated by a suicide run that no sane species would have attempted. And still the humans held their fire, offering mercy to an enemy who had come to kill. It made no sense. The Kresh did not offer mercy. They conquered or they exterminated. The idea of treating defeated enemies with anything but contempt was alien to their entire philosophy. Yet here were these humans, these Deathworlders who fought with a ferocity that matched the Kresh's own, offering quarter. "Sir," Veltash said quietly from the sensor station, "their weapons are locked on us. If we don't comply, they will fire." Torgash felt something he had not experienced in 20 years of military service, genuine fear. Not fear of death, which was always a possibility in combat, but fear of having fundamentally misjudged an opponent. The humans had not fought like merchants or diplomats. They had fought like warriors born to it, with creativity and courage that bordered on madness. And yet they offered mercy. "Power down weapons," Torgash ordered, the words tasting like ash. "Transmit our surrender." Across the solar system, the Shadow of Conquest's commander made the same choice. The battle was over. Humanity had won. In the medical center on Ascension Island, the Vakran refugees had watched the entire battle on screens, courtesy of Admiral Webb's decision that they deserved to know what was happening in their name. Captain Thelvar stood frozen, his legs trembling as he watched ships clash and die in the void above. When the final Kresh vessel surrendered, he collapsed to his knees. "They fought for us," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They died for us." Elder Mernset placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her own eyes filled with tears. "In 4,000 years of recorded Vakran history, no species has ever defended another at such cost. We thought the galaxy had forgotten what honor meant. Perhaps we were simply looking in the wrong places." Vestrin, the young Vakran who had adopted Dr. Kowalski, tugged on the doctor's sleeve. "Does this mean we're really safe now?" Kowalski knelt down to her level, his own eyes damp. "Yes, little one. You're safe. The humans made sure of that." "But why?" Vestrin asked, the question that every Vakran had been asking since they arrived. "Why would they do this for us?" Kowalski smiled sadly. "Because that's what humans do, sweetheart. We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's who we are." The aftermath of the battle took weeks to process. The Kresh prisoners were interned at a facility on Luna, treated with medical care that shocked them. They had expected execution or slavery. Instead, they received food, water, medical treatment for their injuries, and housing that met galactic standards for prisoner welfare. Commander Torgash spent hours being interrogated by human intelligence officers, and with each session, his understanding of these strange beings deepened. "You could have destroyed us," he said during one session, speaking to a human colonel named Patterson. "When we were crippled, you could have simply finished us. Why didn't you?" Patterson, a career military officer with gray hair and a scarred face, studied the Kresh commander for a long moment. "Because we're not like you. We don't kill defenseless enemies. We fight when we must, and when the fight is over, we show mercy. That's the difference between warriors and butchers." Torgash absorbed this, his worldview cracking. "The Vakran were defenseless. My empire did not show them mercy." "No," Patterson agreed quietly. "You didn't, and that's why we fought you. That's why we'll keep fighting anyone who preys on the helpless." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from Earth. Admiral Webb had made a decision, one that would change the course of galactic history. 3 weeks after the battle, Webb stood in the communications center at Luna Command, surrounded by his senior staff and representatives from the Terran Council. Before him was a quantum communication array, recently modified to reach across light years in real time. He had spent days crafting the message he was about to send, weighing each word, knowing that what he said next would determine humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. Captain Thelvar and Elder Mernset stood nearby, having been invited to witness this moment. The Vakran refugees had been offered a choice: remain on Earth or seek refuge elsewhere in the galaxy. To a being, they had chosen to stay. Earth was the first place in their long ordeal that had felt safe, and many of them could not imagine leaving. Webb took a deep breath and activated the array, broadcasting on the emergency frequency used by the Galactic Council. His message would reach every major civilization within days. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force, broadcasting from the Sol system. For 60 years, humanity has maintained silence, hidden from the galaxy after our first contact ended in tragedy. We disappeared because we were told we were too dangerous, too unpredictable to integrate peacefully. We accepted that judgment and chose isolation over conflict." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But we can no longer remain silent. 3 weeks ago, Vakran refugees fleeing genocide entered our space. They were pursued by Kresh warships intent on completing an extermination. We offered the Vakran asylum. The Kresh demanded we surrender them. We refused." Webb's expression hardened. "The Kresh attacked. We defended, and we won. 2 of their warships were destroyed, the 3rd captured. The Vakran refugees are safe, alive, and under Earth's protection." He leaned closer to the camera, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Let me be clear about what this means. As of today, Earth is declaring itself a sanctuary world. Any species fleeing persecution, genocide, or unjust prosecution may seek asylum here. We will evaluate each case on its merits, but we will not turn away the helpless simply because helping them is inconvenient or dangerous." The command center was silent, everyone absorbing the magnitude of what Webb was saying. This was not just a return to the galactic stage. This was a declaration of purpose, a line drawn in the cosmic sand. "We are not rejoining the Galactic Council," Webb continued. "We do not seek trade agreements or diplomatic alliances. We make only one promise: we will defend those who cannot defend themselves. Any species, any government, any empire that preys on the weak will answer to us. This is not a threat, it is a fact." He stood straighter, his military bearing evident. "We are humanity. We do not abandon the helpless. We do not ignore injustice. We do not surrender our principles for convenience. Not now, not ever. To the refugees of the galaxy, Earth's door is open. To the predators, come at your own risk." Webb reached forward and terminated the transmission. The command center remained silent for several heartbeats, then erupted in a mixture of applause and worried murmurs. They had just announced humanity's presence to a galaxy that had tried to forget them, and they had done so by essentially declaring themselves the protectors of the downtrodden. The implications were staggering. Thelvar approached Webb, his movements uncertain. "Admiral, what you have done. The consequences could be severe. The Kresh Empire will not forgive this defeat. Other powers may see your declaration as a threat to the existing order. Webb nodded. I know, we'll deal with that as it comes, but I couldn't stay silent, Captain, not after what I've seen. The galaxy failed you. It failed everyone the Kresh destroyed. Someone needs to stand up and say that's not acceptable. Elder Mernset spoke, her voice soft but clear. You have given us more than asylum, Admiral. You have given us hope. Hope that perhaps the galaxy can be better than it is. Hope that kindness still exists among the stars. Webb managed a tired smile. Let's hope the galaxy agrees with you, Elder. 6 months passed. The galaxy's response to Webb's message was mixed and complicated. The Galactic Council issued a formal statement expressing concern about Earth's unilateral declaration, warning that harboring refugees from member species could create diplomatic incidents. Several governments, particularly those friendly with the Kresh Empire, condemned humanity's actions as interference in internal affairs. But other voices emerged. Species that had suffered under the Kresh's expansion quietly reached out to Earth, expressing gratitude that someone had finally stood up to the Empire. Smaller civilizations, long intimidated by the Council's major powers, began to see humanity as a potential counterbalance. And slowly, refugees began to arrive. The first ship after the Vakran was a small vessel carrying 37 Kelthrin, an insectoid species fleeing religious persecution on their homeworld. Then came a transport with 112 Morphians, whose planet had been conquered and whose people faced enslavement. Within 6 months, Earth had granted asylum to over 2,000 refugees from 14 different species. The Vakran settlement in New Zealand's South Island became a model for integration. The refugees had chosen a location with low gravity relative to Earth's norm, making it easier for their physiology to adapt. With human help, they had begun building a new community, blending Vakran architecture with Earth materials. Vakran children attended schools alongside human children, learning Earth's languages while teaching their own. Cultural exchange programs flourished. Thelvar had taken on the role of ambassador, becoming the first alien to address the United Nations. His speech, delivered in halting but improving English, brought tears to many eyes. He spoke of loss and hope, of despair and salvation, of a galaxy that had forgotten compassion and a species that remembered. When we fled into the dark, he said, standing at the podium in New York, we expected death. We found instead a people who valued life over convenience, who chose courage over safety, who remembered that strength without compassion is merely brutality. Humanity saved us not because we had anything to offer, but because it was right. That is a rare thing in this galaxy. Perhaps it is the rarest thing of all. The speech was broadcast across Earth and through quantum channels to watching alien civilizations. The message was clear. Humanity was back, and they were not the monsters the galaxy had feared. But peace was fragile, and Earth's new role came with challenges. The Kresh Empire, humiliated by their defeat, began amassing ships at the edge of human space. They did not attack, but their presence was a constant reminder that conflict could resume at any moment. Other powers watched carefully, evaluating whether Earth's military capabilities matched its bold words. Admiral Webb, now promoted to overall command of Terran defense, spent his days preparing for possibilities he hoped would never come. The fleet was expanded, new ships laid down in the orbital yards. Training intensified. Diplomatic channels were opened with species willing to talk to humanity, building a network of informal allies. Commander Reeves, promoted to captain and given command of the new TDSS Sentinel-class flagship, patrolled the outer system with heightened vigilance. Long-range sensors detected regular contacts now, ships approaching the solar system, some with peaceful intent, others probing humanity's defenses. Each contact was evaluated, each potential threat assessed. Dr. Kowalski found himself running a xenobiology department that grew by the month, studying the needs of species Earth had never encountered before. The medical challenges were immense, but so were the rewards. Vestrin, now healthy and thriving, often helped him in the lab, translating for newly arrived Vakran refugees and serving as a bridge between species. On a cool evening in early spring, Webb stood on the observation deck at Luna Command, looking down at the blue-green marble of Earth. The planet was no longer hidden, no longer alone. Ships moved in orbit, some human, some alien. Refugees from across the galaxy had found safety there, and more were coming. His communicator chimed. Captain Reeves's face appeared on the small screen. "Admiral, we have contacts. 7 ships, civilian configuration, entering the outer system. They're broadcasting on refugee frequencies, requesting asylum." Webb felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders. 7 ships. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of beings fleeing something terrible, seeking the safety that Earth had promised to provide. Each arrival brought new challenges, new risks, new potential for conflict with the powers that wanted them returned or destroyed. "Bring them in, Captain," Webb said quietly. "We'll find room." Reeves smiled. "Understood, sir. Sentinel-7 is moving to intercept and provide escort." The transmission ended, and Webb remained at the window, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kresh Empire plotted revenge. Somewhere, the Galactic Council debated sanctions. Somewhere, species who saw humanity as a threat made plans. But also out there, refugees heard Earth's promise and found the courage to flee their oppressors. Species facing extinction found hope in humanity's declaration. The downtrodden and desperate looked to Saul and saw a light in the darkness. Earth had chosen its path. Not conquest, not isolation, but protection. The role of guardian to those who had no other defender. It was a heavy burden, one that would demand sacrifice and courage in measure unknown. But Webb knew, with absolute certainty, that it was the right choice. Because in the end, what defined a species was not its weapons or its technology or its strength. What defined a species was what it chose to do when faced with suffering it could prevent. Humanity had made its choice 60 years ago when it hid from the galaxy. Now it had made a different choice, and the galaxy would have to accept it. Behind him, the command center hummed with activity. Ships were being deployed, resources allocated, facilities prepared for the incoming refugees. Earth's machinery of compassion ground into motion, well practiced now after 6 months of constant arrivals. Webb turned from the window and headed back to his desk. There were reports to read, decisions to make, threats to evaluate. The work never ended. But as he settled into his chair and pulled up the latest intelligence briefings, he felt no regret. Earth was no longer hiding. Earth was standing, arms open to the desperate, fists ready for any who would prey on them. The galaxy had forgotten humanity once. It would not make that mistake again. The Forbidden Zone had been revealed for what it truly was, not a tomb for the lost, but a sanctuary for the hunted. And at its heart burned a blue-green world where beings of every description found the one thing the galaxy had denied them: hope.